My name's David Lorimer, and I am the Program Director of the Scientific and Medical Network and of the Beyond the Brain conference, which is coming up on the 5th to the 7th of November. And I'm here today with one of our main speakers, Graham Hancock. It's delightful to see you here, Graham. And I'm just going to ask you one or two questions, sort of background. And the first is there a single experience that you had that started off your inquiry about consciousness beyond the brain?
Yes, there was indeed a single experience that I had, which I can look back on now and say it started off this inquiry into the mystery of the brain. And that was a massive electric shock that I suffered in my late teens. While standing in water with wet hands, I touched an exposed electric terminal and was thrown across the kitchen. And I left my body. I was up around the light looking down at myself, and I thought, my goodness, this is weird. What's going on here? I didn't have the tunnel of light. I didn't have the deceased relatives telling me it wasn't my time. I was straight back into my body, but just for an instant, I was outside my body looking down. And that's when I started to think, I am not my body. I'm something separate from my body. My body is part of me, but it doesn't define me. How else could I be looking down on myself from outside? It was a great mystery, and it sparked curiosity in me that came to fruition much later in my life.
Goodness, that's quite dramatic, Graham. Thank you. And if you were completely new coming to the subject, is there anything you recommend to a newcomer?
Well, this may sound a bit tough, but I would say don't automatically trust the science. Science is a brilliant thing. Science has done so much wonderful work for humanity. But there is a tendency for scientists, we're all human beings, to get locked in particular positions and to approach problems from a particular outlook. And there's a faction of science, I wouldn't say it's all science, which is very firmly convinced that everything can be reduced to matter. And that consciousness is simply a sort of epiphenomenon of brain activity. And this is taken as their starting point through which they review all material, but it's not a fact. It's not a fact that everything can be reduced to matter. That is an opinion of a certain group of scientists, and that opinion is wrongly presented as a fact. So I would say, investigate the science. Don't automatically trust it, and look at the biases of those scientists who are presenting the materialist point of view. And the second thing I'd say is look at the great research that's now being done at places like Johns Hopkins and at Imperial College into psychedelics. Look at the great research that's being done there and consider the implications of that for consciousness and for what it all means.
Well, of course, that's the whole point of having a Beyond the Brain conference, isn't it? To question this, what I call the central dogma of neuroscience, that the brain produces consciousness.
Exactly. So, we don't know that the brain produces consciousness. This is not an established fact. We know that the brain is intimately related to consciousness, but the nature of the relationship is not absolutely clear. And much more work needs to be done before we can take dogmatic positions saying that the brain creates consciousness. The analogy I often use is the TV signal and the TV set. If the TV set is broken, the signal still continues. And I suggest it may also be that way with consciousness, that it isn't limited to the body, it isn't confined to the body, it doesn't necessarily end when the body ends. We need to look much more deeply into these matters, and I'm encouraged that the new work in research into psychedelics may be opening avenues to explore this issue.
Absolutely, Graham, and that's really what we're trying to explore in the whole Beyond the Brain series. And then tell us a little bit about what you'll be talking about with Rupert Sheldrake at this meeting.
Well, Rupert and I work in very different fields, really. I mean, Rupert, to my mind, is one of the brilliant scientists working in the field of consciousness, and I'm more of a journalist, really. But we have something in common. And what we have in common was that in January 2013, we both gave presentations at a TEDx event in London. And a month later, TED took our talks offline because our talks didn't kowtow to the materialist view of science. What we shared in common was the notion that consciousness might be non-local, that it might not be confined to or defined by the brain alone. And that seemed to really annoy TED, who have a strong materialist bias in their science board. And they took these talks offline. Fortunately, there was a massive reaction on the internet, and many people uploaded the talks before they were taken offline. And those talks have now had millions of views outside the TED platform. I want to discuss with Rupert the implications of all of this for the way that our society works and the way that science works in our society, and the tendency for scientists effectively to apply censorship to opposing views by saying these views don't fit in with what we know to be true, when in fact it's not what they know to be true, it's what they believe to be true. And the other issue I'd like to get into with Rupert is if we are taking this non-local model of consciousness, if we're saying that consciousness may not be simply generated by the brain, but may rather be transduced, brought in to this level of reality by the brain, then what are the implications for our understanding of reality? Perhaps it's not nearly as simple as we imagine. Just as reality seemed much simpler before the invention of the microscope, so also reality may seem much more complex when we use tools like psychedelics to investigate the nature of consciousness. And I think these are fruitful areas to discuss with Rupert, and I'm looking forward to doing so.
Thanks so much, Graham. Well, we're really looking forward to seeing you and Rupert at Beyond the Brain, 5th to 7th of November, beyondthebrain.org. Thanks so much.
Thank you.